there's a war on for your mind.
Our next guest is with us till about 40 after, and he's going to come back on in the summer when his new book, The Dark Side of the Force, comes out. Much of what he knows he can't tell us because of national security, but he's got a little bit of new info he can reveal here today. We're going to talk about a host of issues: the underwear bomber, the body scanners, the police state, 9/11, how he was gagged from being able to talk to the public about what he knew, how he was persecuted. He's Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer, of course, of Able Danger fame. You've seen him on television many, many times, and he is with us again for the next 30 minutes or so. Colonel Shaffer, it's great to have you here with us.
Well, thanks, Ed. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad that we got in touch with each other. There's so much going on, and I could go over your bio, but for those that may not know who you are, recap who you are and your experience with trying to stop 9/11 and then your persecution.
Right. Well, to put it all in kind of a nutshell, I'm a case officer by trade, trained by CIA years ago, a lot of years ago. My primary job with the Department of Defense was to conduct human intelligence operations, which the public commonly knows as espionage. I did that for about 20 years, and my specialty was special operations support, direct support special operations. So while I wasn't necessarily a Green Beret, I spent a lot of time with them, supporting them, and then doing things in what's known as the black world, the black operations world. And of course, within the context of that, I did a lot of it both as an Army civilian, as an Air Force civilian, and also as a Defense Intelligence Agency civilian. All along, I was an Army reservist, and a lot of the stuff I would do and still continue to do is as an Army reservist. And so the primary focus of all of that work, frankly, was going after hard targets, going after the real challenges of the country, the North Koreans, the Iranians. I did a lot of work on things like counter-drug back when we were actually focusing on counter-drug back in the 90s. And it all kind of culminated in the late 90s, at least from my perspective, in a project called Able Danger. And Able Danger was essentially an entrepreneurial concept that was brought up by General Hugh Shelton, who was then chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who tasked General Schoonmaker, the then commander of Special Operations Command, to bring together a group to really do out-of-the-box thinking, to take a clean sheet of paper, if you will, and try to see what would be possible to go after a transnational, and what we mean by transnational is something that does not sit in one single country, a transnational threat, which back then was the then blossoming threat of Al-Qaeda. And it was very innovative. We tried to put together a hybrid team of folks from Defense Intelligence, which was my element, something called Stratus Ivy. We were a special mission task force, along with technology and support of the Army Land Information Warfare Activity, which was doing some very advanced data mining, which was then being funded by Representative Kurt Weldon. There was a great interest by Congress to try to actually do some things with new technology, all on behalf of the Special Operations Command, who had the charter, who was tasked by General Shelton and General Schoonmaker to try to find ways to go after Al-Qaeda. And again, it's notable here, Alex, that this was all pre-9/11. This was all done 98, 99, 2000. And it was a very advanced, for the time, data mining effort. That was a lot of people don't understand. That was just one part of it. The actual components, the larger moving pieces, if you will, were never really brought to light during the Able Danger hearings and everything else. And I will talk about that a little bit more in the book when the book comes out. Right now, it's going to review, so I'm not sure what's going to make it through completely, but the idea here,
you're having to get, for those that don't know, national security overview and release authorization from what, the Department of Defense, CIA?
Oh, no, from Army. Since I'm an Army body, and I was actually on active duty with the Army during the time that I was conducting the operations in Afghanistan. And this book is going to focus primarily on Afghanistan, the dark side of the force, and it has to do with my work there, working as part of Task Force 180 and Task Force 121. I was actually attached to 121, which is General McChrystal's command in Afghanistan back in 03 and 04. And it goes into a fairly good detail about how we were doing things, and frankly, we're portraying it clearly as the tipping point in Afghanistan. We've been able to, a lot of the folks I worked with have collaborated. I was assigned to something called the Leadership Targeting Cell, the LTC. We had good cooperation, excellent cooperation from my colleagues on that. And so we've been able to kind of go through and detail. It's kind of an action adventure, in that I think the readers will like it by the fact I try to tell it from the first person, much like the Martin Sheen character, the Captain Willard character in Apocalypse Now. It's almost, and you can probably appreciate this from your perspective, Alex, the insanity of seeing bureaucracy in action. And a large part of the focus is kind of give people a feel for what it was like to have to deal with not only the enemies that are shooting at you, but your own enemies who are behind the wire, who just really don't want to do the right thing. And so we try to portray this fairly, and it'll be focused primarily on my work in Afghanistan. But,
well, we're going to talk about that one, and I'm looking really forward to a full-hour interview with you when The Dark Side of the Force comes out, and find out who the Emperor Palpatine is in this story. But expanding, you then tried to tell the 9/11 Commission and Congress this info, and then they began to persecute you. Why was that?
Well, it's interesting how it all kind of popped up. And the book will only talk about the initial disclosure, and it'll end kind of with me being pulled off the front line after my second deployment to Afghanistan. But my initial disclosure came directly to Dr. Philip Zelikow, who was the then chair of the 9/11 Commission. And what I just told you and your audience is what I told him, but in about an hour's worth of briefing, where I lay out all the bones of the operation. I lay out everything from who was involved, what was the focus. I talked about some clandestine operations which were related to it, which we were using to support the targeting effort. And of course, one of the things which drew total silence and shock when I brought it up was the fact that we discovered 3 of the 9/11 hijacker cells. We discovered 3 of the 4 cells of the 9/11 attacks. And it was, total shock and dismay by the people in the room, to include Dr. Zelikow. And then during that initial disclosure, he pulls me aside at the end of that meeting, and at Bagram, this happened in October of 2003, and gives me his card and says, what you said today, and I'm going to quote as accurately as I remember, and I think this is directly from my testimony, what you said today is very important. We need to continue this dialogue. I need you to contact me upon your return to the United States. And at which time I explained to him, well, I'm actually undercover here, so I'm going to have to give you, my real name is something else. I will, contact your staff when I get back. And it was during that time, between October and February and January, frankly, something happened. And to me, there's still a mystery of what exactly happened. But sure enough, I followed up, contacted his staff, and all of a sudden they don't want to talk to me. Even though what I said there at Bagram, they were very, very shocked, very interested. And I was told after talking to his staff twice, I'll quote as accurately as I remember it, we don't need you to come in. We have all the information on Able Danger that we need, unquote. And that's kind of when things started going wrong, and I really didn't know why. Next thing I know, my clearance is suspended, and I'm pulled off the front line, despite the fact I received the Bronze Star, was sent back a second time to plan a surge operation for another surge to go after bin Laden. And it was I was pulled off over what can only be which would only be described as petty issues, and I'll go through them briefly.
Well, hold on before you do that, Colonel Shaffer. We also have Farmer, one of the head lawyers for the commission, saying there was a cover-up going on within the commission. We see them persecuting you. We see them, tell us what happened to you in the persecution, but then what do you think about Sybil Edmonds' testimony that she was listening to communiques where elements of the CIA were communicating with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and knew about their movements, thanks to the intel you and others were gathering, right up until the moment of 9/11?
Well, I tend to believe that there's a great deal of truth to that, and then there's a couple things I want to add to that to back up your point. First, when I was in closed hearings, when I was getting ready to go into closed hearings in the Hill back in 2000, I'm going fast forward here a little bit, but in 2006 when I was in closed hearings, Representative Sylvester Reyes himself comes up to me. And as you know, Sylvester Reyes is now, I believe, the chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And Representative Reyes comes up and says, Colonel Shaffer, I know there's something to what you're saying because Dr. Zelikow came and approached me in January of 2006 and 2004 and said, There's something called Able Danger. We think it's promising. We'll get back to you on that. And frankly, they never got back to him. So this is one of the senior Democrats coming to me and saying they told us about it, but then they never followed up. So I do believe something happened internally. And I've talked to a couple of the 9/11 Commission folks. I can't go on a lot of detail. They've asked me to not give out their names. But frankly, one of the 9/11 commissioners told me personally everybody was covering for someone within that commission. That is to say that everybody who was a commissioner had an agenda. And
but what about Sybil Edmonds saying she was decoding the FBI/NSA recordings out of the foreign language, out of Arabic, and she's sitting there listening to it, and it is elements of Western intelligence interfacing, and we know that Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski brags in 2 books he wrote that they got the Arab Legion together out of other Muslim extremist groups and that they were interfacing with it right up until the attacks. That makes perfect sense for you, a separate division going after them. Once you expose that you guys could have gone after them, but many others have said they were kept from going after them, then that shows clearly that they wanted the attacks to happen to set up a police state in America.
Well, I can't go that far, Alex. I mean, you obviously have an overview different than mine. What I can say are the facts, and this is one of the things I try to be very clear on over the past 6 years, is that there's still a great deal of mystery as to why Able Danger stopped. And I can state that clearly because this was in my testimony, and it's one of those mysteries which I
Well, let me just say this then. We saw Special Forces colonels and others, your contemporaries, your peers, in the news in 2002 complaining. And I had the author of Jawbreaker on, too, with the CIA saying we weren't allowed to go after anybody real, and every time we caught somebody real, we were told, let them go.
Well, and I understand what you're saying about the Jawbreaker, and I've read the book, and that's what I'm going to tell you here. Regarding Able Danger, there's still a mystery as to why it stopped. The operation planning occurred during the 99-2000 time frame, and as far as we all know, as part of the team, the last tangible, real element of Able Danger occurred in January, February 2001, in which the Able Danger core team briefed General Shelton at the Pentagon about the options. And this is the thing I wanted to emphasize about Able Danger, Alex. It was not about data mining. It was about options to take action against Al-Qaeda. And again, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more.
You were targeting, you were tracking, you were identifying.
Yes.
And so you had them targeted and identified,
right.
and you weren't green-lighted.
That's correct. That is an accurate statement. Because, as a matter of fact, up till June of 2001, I was getting calls from my colleague, Commander, now Captain Scott Philpott, asking me to reactivate my component, my Stratus Ivy element, to help them continue the targeting process. And frankly, he was getting a great deal of static. I was pulled off. As a matter of fact, I was pretty much fired because I wouldn't back down on the issue. I actually had a confrontation, which you can find on the internet, where I talked to the government security news, where I was interviewed, and I talked about the fact that my boss, Major General Rod Isler, and I had a shouting contest where I basically said, look, we've got to do this because this is a clear target. And I was told, it's not your job. I'm the general, you're not, and I'm telling you to stop. So essentially during that time frame from February of 2001 until, the attacks, those of us who were trying to actively work this, who, because of our, and Alex, you understand this. I mean, I didn't just come off the street and pick up being an intelligence officer overnight. I had quite a bit of experience at the time. And so did the entire team. And we were all saying there's something wrong here. We got to do something because there's indications that these people are not only going to do something, we have cells of Al-Qaeda within the United States. And that
well, let me stop you then before we get into that, Colonel Shaffer, and we really appreciate your time here today.
Yeah.
Separate investigations on separate operations similar to yours, they have spoken out and said the State Department and higher-level CIA killed our operations to decapitate Al-Qaeda. So your take on that?
Well, again, I can only go back to my direct experience. There was an asset who had fabulous access to Al-Qaeda, who was I can't go into a lot of detail. I have to be very careful about this because I talked about this in closed hearings. There was an operative, someone we had recruited, who we had every indication was loyal to us, who had fabulous access to the Al-Qaeda planning elements within Kabul. And frankly, this gets closer to the point of what Able Danger, my part of Able Danger, was all about. That was really the focus for me, was Kabul. And what this individual had access to. And one of the things I told the 9/11 Commission was, we don't know why we were told to terminate our access to this individual. This became a huge battle because my then boss, Major General Bob Harding, actually went to the Hill to plead for our ability to continue running that asset because he had fabulous access, and for some reason it was terminated.
Well, sir, why is it the same story?
I did report this to the 9/11 Commission, and as far as I can tell, this was never followed up in any great detail either.
Why is it the same story with Hassan a couple months ago at Fort Hood? For 2 years, he's sending emails. The CIA is capturing it all. Now Congress wants to see that. They've declared national security. We have the underwear bomber 2 weeks ago. He specifically, they want to put him on the watch list. His dad warns. He gets through. I mean, this is not just government incompetence. These guys always get through.
No, and that's the funny thing here, Alex. You got to look at this because, again, we had testimony, we had hearings on this in 2002, 2003. Again, when I testified in 2006 about the same core issues, and here we are in 2009, and I find it, and I'll be totally blunt here, I find it insulting that you have the special advisor of the president, Mr. Brennan, saying, we just didn't get our act together. As an American taxpayer, I'm aghast at the money they have spent over the past 6 years trying to fix this. After, I personally put my career on the line to go testify about it, and yet no one seems to take seriously the need to fix the system. And Alex, it's not about more. It's not at all about more. As a matter of fact, we're going the wrong way. The more bureaucracy you create, the better the chances are you will have an Hassan or an underwear bomber get through security, because you are not layering security, you are bloating security. And this is where, and I know that one of the reasons we're talking is because Mr. Tarpley was saying, I've been out talking about this a little bit, and I think he agrees with me on this point. I'd like to believe so. I am not for more bureaucracy. As a matter of fact, the actual elegance of Able Danger was we avoided the bureaucracy, and that was one of the downfalls of the project, I believe, because we avoided the powers that be relating to who the pros consider themselves to be regarding Al-Qaeda and all that.
And they didn't want you to upstage them.
No, absolutely, and that was a huge issue. I actually had a confrontation with one of the CIA officers at SOCOM. He was a friend of mine. I had to go in and brief him on Able Danger, and he was being as friendly as he could be when he told me, Tony, I understand what Able Danger is about. I know it's not competing with us, but I can tell you right now, we CIA will never share our best information with you, because if you're successful and we're not, you will upstage us. Therefore, we will not participate. So, again, we recognize...
Is that why the CIA's been using Blackwater instead of the Army?
Well, I actually was on ABC News with Brian Ross's unit on this just recently, where I talked about the fact that this is one of the strange ironies. I was the guy who had to handle the first two Blackwater operatives who were killed in action back in October of 2003. So not only do I have direct knowledge of it, I was the guy that, when they got killed, I had to do the graves registration stuff. That's the military term for basically coordinating the removal of the bodies from country to leave. So, in my judgment, absolutely. One of the things we recognized early on during the war is CIA really wanted to run its own game. And again, this is going to be something we talk about in the book to a great extent. So
they're setting up their own private army instead of using the Army.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. And what they were doing is, and this is not new. This is in the public domain. They have their ground operations branch, which actually does their paramilitary operations. And one of the problems after 9/11 is they had a hard time building it up quickly with qualified and cleared officers. So one of the things they did, they took a shortcut and started hiring Blackwater individuals who were, essentially coming out of Army Special Operations, out of Navy Special Operations, and putting them out in the field as CIA operatives. And again, this has been on Brian Ross. You can go to the internet, you can pull up the story where I talk about this on air. And yeah, the fact is this: they were taking these contractors and using them essentially, and I'll be blunt, mercenaries. They were using them in a role, not as security guards, but as guys outside the wire trying to train Afghan and Pakistani individuals to be essentially their operatives on the ground to do special operations.
And they've got them in Pakistan right now.
Yes. So exactly. So that's what we're faced with right now. And frankly, one of the things I said with Brian Ross, and I'll say it again here, is that I think they did a great deal of this to avoid oversight. Because I think, and I've heard this from other folks on the Hill, the staffers, that there's a lot more that's supposed to come out on this. Because frankly, it appears now, and I think that's one of the reasons that Mr. Panetta, the DCI, actually went over and reported this to Congress, because I think when he discovered the fact that Blackwater was being used in operational roles, not as just guards, I think that's one of the reasons he made the disclosure to Congress immediately, because that is not within, as I understand it, CIA's purview to use Blackwater as operatives instead of guards. And that is clearly something that they used because they didn't want to use Army guys, regular uniform folks. And as you know, we who are in uniform still have to follow a lot of rules. There's a lot of laws, a lot of rules. And contractors.
But regardless of those laws and rules, you could have decapitated the Al-Qaeda leadership months before 9/11, and it didn't happen. And when you exposed that, they tried to persecute you.
That is my belief, based on all the evidence and other folks who have similar evidence, and frankly, insiders who have confirmed it to me, but will not come forward because they don't want to give up their career. They understand if they say anything, they will be gone after as well.
This is amazing. We've got a final segment with you, and I want to shift gears into some other areas of 9/11 and what's currently happening with the body scanners. Get your take on that. And certainly we look forward to having you back up in the near future. Colonel Anthony Shaffer from Able Danger is our guest. An amazing interview, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, we've got more time to talk here than on most TV shows, and this is very revealing. Stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Burmis' film that I produced, Fabled Enemies, details what really happened on 9/11 from all the evidence. My film Terror Storm also goes over it. The bare minimum, governments let this happen so they can take your rights, your freedom. Take the MIAC report we leaked that the military and police gave us. Take the Homeland Security report, where it's really all set up for conservatives, libertarians, Bob Barr, Ron Paul, get us out of the UN stickers or demonized. What do you think of hearing that in the news, that most of Homeland Security and domestic operations now is focused on conservatives? I mean, the public's told this is all for Al-Qaeda, and then the whole thing's set up for the American people. Colonel Shaffer.
Well, I got to tell you, I believe most of the measures which have been put in place to include, the concept of the body scanner, a lot of those stuff, and frankly, and we talked a bit on the break about the scanner supports. I got to tell you, most of the stuff is proven, if you look at the scientific evidence, to not really be all that effective. But we spend tons of money. I actually attended a hearing a while back on the backscatter devices that they put in the ports, and the fact that they had to report, the Department of Homeland Security had to report, they're not really working. And there is something called ASP. And, of course, their answer was, we need more money. If you give us another, $100 million, well, the manufacturer thinks they'll fix it. And that's part of the problem. I think almost the government becomes a taxi, if you will, for corporate America, because a lot of these companies have huge amounts of resources invested. Raytheon, Boeing, some of the other big companies, I'm not trying to single them out, but I'm just saying that a lot of companies do benefit very much by investing in these technologies. And my problem with the process, obviously, as someone who, I'm a think tank guy, is that they don't really work. And my belief is good money after bad is a key indicator of a lack of accountability. You've got to be honest. You've got to stand up at some point and say, it ain't working. We've wasted all this money. You got to stop. We got to take a different course. And this is where we have problems all throughout the system, lack of accountability. And again, and this is indicative of the fact that we almost had a Northwest airliner brought down by the fact there's no accountability.
Colonel, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we've only got 6 minutes left with you. You've agreed to come back on in the near future. And we want to give out any websites, any other information you want to give here at the end. But let me go back to 9/11 briefly. Here's CBS News. Hijackers lived with FBI informant. Just going to throw that out. And they were ordered to stand down, not just you. This is Newsweek. Exclusive. The informant who lived with the hijackers. Here's another one. Newsweek. Alleged hijackers may have trained at U.S. bases. Then we get, in the Associated Press, the colonel, head of the Monterey Defense Language School, saying, look, some of these guys were at our base. We have Springman, the head of the U.S. Embassy section in Saudi Arabia, being ordered to let them in, even though they were on watch list. And he was told later, oh, that was part of secret training. They were our operatives. So we have all of that. You add all of this together. What can you tell us about talking to other colleagues about hijackers being allowed in and out of the country, being protected, not acting in a very Muslim extremist fashion with all the whores and drugs and topless bars, the FBI living with them, Israeli intelligence following them around? What was really going on here in the U.S.?
Well, again, I got to be careful to limit myself to my direct knowledge, and I'll add to the pieces that I have. I'll be happy to add the pieces. I don't want to comment on other people's information. I can tell you this for a fact, Alex, is the fact that during the data mining phase of Able Danger, Al-Qaeda cells were discovered. And the fact that they were discovered was haunting. A lot of folks were shocked that the information that we'd had uncovered as a team indicated that they were active cells. This is not like just, people who are sleepers. These are active cells doing things. And the appearance was that they were active. They weren't sleeper, they were active. They were doing
They were preparing for something.
Exactly. So that information was passed forward. And there's good evidence now from a friend of mine who did some research that the information that we came up with was reported to President Clinton in the Millennium Bomber Report. One of the things that was disclosed that Sandy Berger was after was copies of the Millennium Bombing Report. And within that report, that was well prior to 9/11, was within that report, and this is reported in John Ashcroft's book. I don't remember the name of his book off the top of my head, but John Ashcroft actually admits that there was information in the Millennium Bomber Report relating to Al-Qaeda cells, active cells, being found in the United States. So, we believe, based on the evidence we have, that when that was our gig, that was Able Danger, and obviously at that level you don't call things by its operational name, but we believe that information regarding what was in the Millennium Report that went from Ashcroft to President Clinton was the Able Danger information.
And it was so damning that Berger broke national security laws. He could have gone to prison for life to stick it in his underwear and socks to get it out of there.
That's correct, yes. So that is, right, in my judgment, telling by the fact that, we did discover these guys. It was hugely bad for a lot of folks. And one of the other controversial points I've been told about lately, and this is, I think, new for everybody, one of the things my colleagues have told me is the moment that happened, there was consideration of allowing Special Operations Command to go do some stuff, in the United States, and that was hugely controversial. And I think that's one of the other things they don't want to have talked about is the fact that, some people, to include myself, felt that, look, if these guys are operating here, we need to do something sooner than later. And if we're in the best position to do something, let us do it. And that was hugely unpopular for any number of reasons. Posse Comitatus and all those other restrictions, which I understand why they exist. I support them. But clearly, we had discovered that there were active cells within the United States. And just so everybody understands, this is not new. Eric Kleinsmith, who was the actual analyst who discovered this stuff, testified in front of Senator Al Inspector on this point in August of 2005, I believe.
Well, you've told us some new things, and you're getting, hopefully, security clearance for your book coming out in the early summer, perhaps even late spring. But in the last minute we've got, what can you give us foreshadowing on that is new that's coming out?
Well, I think, just speaking in the general situation right now, you've got the problem with people like Brennan, who have been part of the bureaucracy for the entire time. Don't forget, Alex, no one was ever held accountable for 9/11. And I look at Mr. Brennan doing what he's doing right now, akin to Bernie Madoff being brought back to investigate the damage he caused with his Ponzi scheme. It's ludicrous. So what we got to do, if we only focus on one core issue, that issue needs to be accountability. If you can't do the job, you need to be replaced.
Exactly. Regardless of what happened, we know they screwed up. We know they knew beforehand and let it happen. Bare minimum, for whatever reason, why are they now back in charge, getting away with everything? Yes. And why do you get rewarded for failure? And then people that actually did a good job, like yourself, no one denies you did a great job. You're being persecuted for trying to kill Osama bin Laden if he supposedly, is the guy over at Al-Qaeda that was involved in all of this. And now we see more and more of this used to take our liberties and our freedom. And again, on record, you do want a new investigation of 9/11.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I publicly supported the NICAN call for a new investigation. And while I don't agree with everything that all the movements stand for out there, I think the one common issue, Alex, we all agree on, we need a new investigation. We need to really turn over all the rocks, get to the real bottom, an independent commission, not consisting of people who have agendas, to sit down to go through everything in detail for a full accounting. And frankly, people need to be fired if they fail to conduct themselves in accordance with their oath of office. So, absolutely.
Is there a website yet for the Dark Side of the Force, the book coming out in the summer?
No, there's not. But what you can do is, I'm a senior fellow with the Center for Advanced Defense Studies, C4ADS.org. We do a combination of studies on technology and policies relating to defense. I do a lot of, they're the think tank I belong to. And obviously I'll come back with you when we do have more information about the book. And I look forward to chatting with you guys in the future as things develop.
Well, I'm flattered that you read InfoWars, Colonel. How long have you been checking that out?
Since it was one that recommended to me very early on when I joined Facebook last year. So I'm a fan of it. So I look at it all the time.
Well, thank you so much, Colonel, and we look forward to reading your new book and look forward to having you back on. Be safe, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
You bet. Goodbye.